Hola. So we'll be returning to the text right after this first session. And if you recall where we left off, the author Panchen Lozang had just given a very brief, very concise reference to two methods. The first being very familiar, and that is simply observing whatever comes up, letting it be. But the second one I've really not dealt with much in this retreat, where he says whatever thought comes up, cut it right off. And he says like a swordsman, right? So some of you who've been listening to podcasts or listened to teachings that I've given over the years, you'll be familiar with the metaphor here, a little tiny bit of a parable. I'll narrate it very shortly. It's very simple. The metaphor here is that of a duel between an archer and a swordsman, right? And the type of swordsman, well, of course there are a lot of kinds of swords. There's a sword of William Wallace. I think his sword is about 6 feet long and broadsword. You could cut off 3 people's head in one stroke. You know, I like that kind. William Wallace, yeah, my forebear. But the other one is like the Three Musketeers. I think it's called a foil. So it's for very quick work. You skewer them rather than, you shish kebab them rather than decapitate them. That's very French. Whereas the broadsword is very Scottish. Just cut off the heads. It's very straightforward. So this is the French, bien sûr. And so the metaphor, you can visualize it so easily. Give the swordsman a chance here. So maybe they're at 50 paces, maybe 100 paces, right? And so they're squaring off. And it's kind of a one-side battle, really, because the archer has a whole quiver full of arrows. And he gets to shoot them whenever he feels like it. He doesn't have to be every 5 seconds. He can pause for 10 seconds and then shoot off 3 in rapid succession. The swordsman is entirely defensive. The swordsman is entirely defensive. He's not going to throw his sword. So he's there, and just like Rhonda's right in front of me. So I tend to, if Rhonda's a bit too close, if she were an archer, she could skewer me before I could deflect. But that's the whole idea. If she's maybe 50 paces, 100 paces away, and I'm very intent on her, as if my life depends on it, and she brings the arrow to the bow. She's waiting for me to waver, to blink, to be distracted. When she thinks she has an end, she will loose the arrow. And if I'm very attentive, I will see the moment that she looses the arrow. I will see the moment in which the arrow is in flight. I will have my sword poised, ready to deflect the arrow before it can get to me. Right? And I'll be waiting. So she could wait, and then bum, or one, and then whatever she likes. So there's no telling when she's going to loose the arrow. So it's entirely defensive on the part of the swordsman, but don't get distracted, because then you'll be aware of the arrow after it's already skewered you. A bit too late. Right? So it's a nice metaphor. It's very straightforward. And I think you've already figured it out. What are you attending to? You're attending to the face of your mind. You're attending to the flow of consciousness from which emerge thoughts, desires, memories, emotions, and so forth. And as soon as something comes up, and here's a real point. We're going to go into the practice and I will give guidance in it. Here's the real point. If this is a very skilled swordsman, it takes very little effort. That is, he has to be very attentive. But when the arrow is in flight and it's just about to get to him, he doesn't need to go, like that, some big gross movement. It's just like that. Something very subtle and just enough to deflect the arrow. And then that's all that's needed. Right? And so similarly, as you're poised there hovering in the immediacy of the present moment, your awareness turned right in upon the mind, this flow of consciousness from which thoughts, desires, memories, and so forth will emerge forth. As soon as you see one coming up, please bear in mind, it takes very little effort to deflect it, to cut it off. It's kind of like a little, it's not big effort, but it's very subtle, it's very precise, and it's precisely poised in the present moment. Right? So that's the quality of awareness. So it's very different ambience than just let it be, let it be. This is not letting be at all. Whatever comes up, deflect it. So it gets one moment in the sun, and then it's snuffed out. One moment of flashing in the light of your awareness, and then it's gone. Okay? And then you rest in that stillness, in the absence, in the aftermath of a thought coming up. You simply rest in that silence. But you rest not slacking off, not waiting, but just poised right in the present moment. Aware of what's left over. That is, you still must maintain the flow of cognizance. And Brendan, what are you maintaining a flow of cognizance of? Exactly right. The luminosity and cognizance of your own awareness, that's exactly right. Or I can rephrase it, but in no way different, just you're aware of the flow of consciousness, the flow of awareness itself, with these two distinctive characteristics. So you're not attending to the space of the mind or the events that are going to appear to you. You're right there, ready to note immediately whatever subjective impulse comes up. So these thoughts, emotions, as they're called in Tibetan, semjung, they're events that emerge from, semjung, mind emergences. They are events that emerge from the flow of the mind. And you see them as soon as they come up, and then like that. Okay, that's it. So a final point, I will give guidance, hopefully not a lot, so you can really be attending to the practice. But I first really kind of immersed myself in this practice when I went down to Sri Lanka after 6 months in India in retreat. And I remember this was 1980, so it was just 4 years earlier Geshe Rabten had taught it. And I remember so vividly, like it was yesterday, what I did. I was living in a little hermitage up in the mountains outside of Kandy. I was doing this practice. And you can't see, but people listening by podcast, you can't see, but everybody else, watch very closely. I'm about to do what I did then, 36 years ago. Okay, I will actually do it. Did anybody see any problem with what I just did? That could be a problem. Yeah. Breathing would be such a distraction. Like, there's no time to breathe. It can come up when I'm breathing out. What do I do then? So I'll not breathe. That'll work out fine, sure. Yeah, that's very easy to do. You get so intent that you just suppress quietly, unconsciously. You suppress the breathing. Bad idea. Bad idea. And it's not only in this practice. I've often told of this professor at Stanford that I saw in a video where he's asked everybody in the audience, bring out your smartphones and check your email. And like 300 people did this. After they did it, he said, okay, how many of you were holding your breath? And it was like lots. Checking email. Oh, what's going to be? Oh. Very common. Really unhealthy. Okay? So, it all the more emphasizes settling body, speech, and mind sequentially, coarse to subtle. And all the way through, that breath just flowing like you're on a vacation in Tahiti. No worries, just breathing in, breathing out. Like that. As relaxed as Tahiti and as sharp as a blade. Well, that's so. Get comfortable.